Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Circling the Rabbit Hole podcast with me, Dr. Claire Kinuthia. Again, call to action this week, subscribe. That's the only way you can help me keep bringing all these informative episodes every single week. This week on the podcast, for me specifically, it's exciting because I have someone, tumetoka mbali. And again, we're continuing with like medical conversations around different issues affecting women. Because again, I'm in the sexual, reproductive, and related mental health space. And so I'm having a colleague and a friend joining me today to have a conversation that you guys have highly requested. Like the number of DMs on this one has been insane. And I understand because we're not really having this conversation. It's not even controversial. It's literally just lack of, I think, care of women beyond a certain age.
Yes.
I think that's what's...
We've forgotten they
we
exist
forget,
once they get babies.
We forget. And ourselves, as we approach certain age, I think it's also important that we just make space for these conversations. I have Dr. Dorcus Muchiri with me on set today.
Asante.
She's, like I said, a colleague, also a gynecologist, but then she's gone further to specialize in certain areas. And again, as is typical of this podcast, I will ask you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and where we can find you.
All right. So thank you so much for having me. This feels very formal. This is not how I normally do life.
Right.
But my name is Dr. Muchiri, as you've rightly said. I think we trained together for Obs and Gyne, which was very exciting. She's quite the leader, and it's really an honor to be here. So by training, I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist first, but I have a huge interest in women's health generally. And I've done a subspecialty in reproductive medicine, which is all your sort of fertility and trying to get babies. So I call myself a baby maker. I'm not sure how valid that is. And further, as I've continued to help couples get pregnant, then I've noticed that we have other issues that are cropping up in terms of difficulties with conceiving that is related to hormones. So that's where the reproductive medicine comes in. And currently sort of dealing with menopause as a subject because I'm seeing younger and younger women trying to get a baby, but I find them menopausal, which is really sad. It breaks my heart. So it got me thinking about what happens when you've gotten children or you've chosen not to conceive, but then menopause finds you, whether you're prepared or not prepared. So that's where the conversation comes from.
Yes. Because like I said, this is highly requested. I'm sure on your end as well.
Yes.
I'm sure it's a question you're asked about all the time.
All the time.
And in fact, you've segued into a very good place for us to start.
Okay.
Is it true? And I will ask this now. I've taken the space of the audience. I'm no longer a colleague. Is it true that we're seeing menopause younger?
Yes, quite interesting. I've now done fertility probably about 6-7 years. And it is in my practice that I started to pick up younger ladies who have been struggling to conceive. And when we do our blood tests, sort of to prepare them to try and conceive, then just coincidentally, it started coming up. And I work in 2 different countries. So I've got questions coming even from my colleagues in Kenya and going like, so what do I do? This lady is trying to conceive, so what should I do about that? But the same thing is happening where I'm currently working and doing a practice. So I have 2 practices in 2 different countries. Don't ask me how I do that. But I'm managing so far.
You're like a superhero, ninja mode activated.
So yes, we are seeing younger and younger ladies, and I've got some theories. So part of the work that I'm doing is doing research on the subject. It may be that progressively we are seeing younger and younger girls starting their periods earlier. So whether that then translates to that they're going to have their menopause earlier, but also environmentally, there's a lot of things that are different. You can't compare, for example, with our grandmothers on our diet, where we live, the water that we drink. We don't know if there's other things in the environment that's causing that. There's a lot of alcohol use, smoking, drugs. Lifestyle isn't exactly great. So yes, we are seeing younger and younger women in the menopause.
Going into menopause. Okay, before we deep dive, maybe we start with a basic definition. So what exactly is menopause?
Okay, so I will break this down very simply, like how I teach my patients.
Yeah,
So I think that's
exactly
the best
how
way.
we do it on this
Exactly how we do
podcast.
it.
Translate medical jargon into English.
Correct. So the theory is that we are typically born with a set number of eggs at birth. So even when you're in your mom's womb, you've got like the organization of the cells that will become the ovaries and what we call the eggs, the follicles where they're carried. So that's already predetermined in advance.
Yeah.
And once you start getting your periods, then you're losing a certain number of eggs, which is very interesting because when we teach girls, we say that they ovulate one egg. So it's not one egg that you're losing a couple of eggs every single month.
Yeah.
So if they don't mature, then the body sort of reabsorbs them. They become what we call atretic. They stop growing and the body just reabsorbs them. The next month there's a fresh batch.
Yeah.
And that continues progressively through your life until the point where you technically run out of eggs. Now the ovary, which is where the eggs are housed, will produce a hormone that's called estrogen. So that's what happens. If you don't have good ovarian reserve or a lot of ovarian tissue, then the estrogen will drop. And that is what causes or technically becomes menopause.
Yeah.
Now, menopause is defined as, we call it a retrospective diagnosis, or like you have to look backwards to say that you now have menopause.
Yeah.
And how we define that is that you've not had a period for 12 months, complete 12 months. But what happens before that happens is about 2 or so years before you start to have what is irregular periods. And for the younger ladies, that's confusing because there are medical conditions like PCOS that can also give you irregular periods.
Yeah.
So your periods start jumping. So you've got maybe 2 months it misses and then it comes and then another 4 months and it plays around like that until one time you will not have a period for 12 months. The period before that is the perimenopause. And then you get into menopause where most of the symptoms come. You can still have symptoms even in the perimenopause. And then once you've gotten into the menopause, about 2 years after, then becomes postmenopause. For some people, the symptoms will sort of settle about because your body gets used to a lower level of hormones. For some people, it can stay up to 10 years. It can be quite dramatic. So that's the basic sort of interpretation of menopause.
Right, yeah. And I like that you've sort of helped us understand it in terms of time frames, because one of the questions I get a lot in clinic is, if I'm noticing symptoms, does it now mean immediately I'm in menopause? Or if I'm in perimenopause, how long is this going to last? And again, from just our experience, there's no set time per person, right?
No.
Like I can't tell you you'll be in perimenopause for 3 years before your period stops for 12 months. Like you said, it's retrospective. So it's not something that we'll see applied across the board.
No.
And like you said, it's also now more confusing because younger and younger women are starting to present with menopause. What is technically menopause. And again, the audience on this podcast tends to be a bit of a mix. So we have medics as well as the non-medics. I was told to stop calling people laymen. So in the space of medics, when it comes to the diagnosis, it's also a tricky space to sit. So what would you say, or how would you advise medics to approach making a diagnosis around perimenopause and then menopause?
Okay. So first, it's important to note that ladies won't come specifically to a gynecologist. For example, if you're having bone pain, which is one of the things that can happen. And especially in the Kenyan system, we don't have yet, hopefully we will with how the new laws are coming up, people who are general practitioners or family medicine. In Kenya, that will probably be your medical officer sort of category or a family medicine consultant. Those, in my opinion, are the best people to be aware about the symptoms. And to be aware that it's so varied, you have to see the lady as a human being in completeness. We see a lot of even doctors, which is unfortunate, will say, no, this, it's very hot outside, so I expect you to have flushes. Brushing off what people are saying. Things like depression, quite rightly, or anxiety and panic attacks should raise your flags before you say, yes, this is a purely mental health problem. Start to assess the hormones. So when you're seeing a patient, especially as a medic, look at her from bird's eye view, rather than this lady has come and she's told me she has bone pain. It's your job as a doctor to tease out other things that could be happening.
True.
And because it can be confusing, hormones can be anything. It can be hair loss. It could be, I'm feeling very tired. So the assumption that there might be some, you're stressed at work. So this is why you have
must
fatigue.
be doing too many hours.
Too many hours.
You're not resting enough. You're not getting quality sleep. Yeah.
So you've got to think broadly, especially with menopause. You've got to think really, really broadly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I keep saying on repeat, we need to start believing our patients.
Yes.
Because if you come in and minimize my symptoms, how will we ever get to a certain diagnosis? Because like you've described some of them, and we'll get into the details of some of the symptoms, but some of them are so nondescript. You can't really say,
that this.
And I think for most medics, unfortunately, especially younger, when you haven't really specialized or anything, hot flashes. That's the one. That's the only. If she does not have hot flashes, it is not.
She's not menopausal. And in fact, you bring that nicely. The WHO has actually brought this as a problem that we should attend to, because they say the women first don't know that this is menopause. No one is. They're not aware about it. But then it's compounded by your doctor also doesn't know that this is menopause. So you're having like a double whammy situation.
And we end up missing the diagnosis. And like, as we're going to talk about it, for some women it's extreme.
Yes.
And so if it's not managed, you actually start to think like you're going crazy, you're going insane. And yet it's something that we could look at your hormones and tell you, okay, this is exactly what's happening and this is how we're going to manage.
Correct.
Right, let's go into symptoms.
Whoa, I had to write them on a list because I was like, I'll probably not remember
so many.
all
and then
of
also,
them.
Nairobi took on a heat wave.
Yes.
So, is this a heat wave that I am feeling? Are these hot flashes?
It could be. It could be either or. Hot flashes typically have a description that most women will say. It doesn't feel like your typical hot and your whole body is hot. It starts almost like from the head. Most women will say, I feel like someone has put a blanket and it's from my head to my, it comes down and all the way down to the feet. And it may or may not be followed with sweating. So if, and I would urge everyone, ladies, speak to your mom, your auntie. You will probably hear someone explaining a hot flash. For us, in terms of doctors, what the women say is, sijui nasikiaje, najisikia sijui aje. Because there's no, it's not very easy to describe what it is. True. But for most people, it feels like a huge heat wave, like what we're experiencing, but from head to toe. And it can be followed back by a lot of sweating. And that sweating is ridiculous. Women carry towels and there's
changes of clothes.
And they get really anxious. You can imagine if we are sat here having this very nice discussion and then suddenly I start to panic and I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh, what's
happening? The guys are recording and it's a bit messy. So that's hot flashes. Now, interestingly, that's what most people know. And I'm doing a bit of work, and African and Black African women aren't suffering as much with hot flashes, which is very interesting.
Really?
I'm analyzing that data at the moment.
I'd be keen to see.
Yes.
Okay.
Even for me, that was interesting. I was like, wow.
I'm like, from the description I get.
That's what we were taught even in school. 80% of women globally present with a flash. That's what the data is. But Caucasians will have hot flashes proper.
Okay.
Africans tend not to have as much. It's not that it's not there, but we are having other problems. Our other problems are joint pains and muscle pains.
Malaria.
Your malaria.
Symptoms of malaria.
Yes,
malaria.
You feel you're very tired. I sleep all the time. I feel sleepy anytime. And in fact, we say, once I eat lunch, I'm so sleepy. You might want to think about things like that. Then for us, from the data that I've got at the moment, is we have a lot of mental health related problems. That's number 2 for us. So the hot flash is actually coming after the mental health problems.
Okay.
So lots of anxiety, feeling like, I'm not being able to do my job properly, or you're anxious even about things that you don't know. Panic attacks, depression is came quite high on the things that I was analyzing. And crying for no reason.
For no reason,
You have no idea why you're crying. And you can imagine if you're married. The fights that are coming, because he's really trying to understand.
Why suddenly
why are you crying? And I don't know why I'm crying. Why are you asking
so
me
how do
why
I
I'm
explain?
I can't explain it.
Exactly.
It's a whole fight and then so for us, then hot flashes comes at that point. We then have sexual problems, sexually related problems, and usually that's low libido. and vaginal dryness.
Yeah.
So you could have a high libido, but you're very dry. It makes it very painful for the lady to have sex, so she starts to avoid sex.
Yeah.
Again, if you think you're in a relationship, you're just playing cat and mouse with your guy.
Exactly.
You don't want him to touch you.
You don't want. You also don't know what's happening.
Yes.
So it's difficult to explain.
Very difficult
so
to explain.
You start avoiding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the libido then can come down. Urogenital problems is the urinary system. So the urinary system and the vagina are very close to each other. So if you're having dryness in the vagina, you can have the same in the system for the urine. And how that presents is recurrent urinary tract infections.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable if every other week you have to get some antibiotics. And on the other hand, then we're having problems with antibiotic resistance because you keep having to get...
and we like to go over the counter.
Oh,
here,
They're experts. What? We can self-prescribe.
I can feel that I have a UTI.
It's coming.
UTI.
And it's coming.
Medication.
And I take ciprofloxacin. Last time it worked.
It worked.
So that's already giving us problems with the resistance for antibiotics.
Yeah.
So those are the biggest, broadest ones. But things like a fracture. So don't go high-fiving your mom with the excellence, because you can actually break her. The bones become very thin. It's called osteoporosis. So those are very small symptoms. A few. They could be more. I had a whole list, actually. My page is full. I'm hoping that I've touched on all of them. I'm just looking. Let me see. Now the bigger ones. You see, I thought I'd finished, but
there are many, and that's the thing, that if you're not looking for things and adding them up together, it's easy to miss this.
It's very easy to miss them. So sleep disturbances. I just have problems sleeping. Sometimes it's because you're too hot at night, so you're not being able to sleep properly, and then you're not productive during the day. And then the bigger things, which we call the public health issues, is hypertension, heart disease, high cholesterol. And you may hear women saying, I can't shift this weight. I'm starving myself here. I take aloe vera juice and it's not helping.
It's not helping.
So that's most of the symptoms.
Okay. And you highlighted mental health related ones.
Yeah.
I think these are the ones where even the women themselves don't understand that can be part of menopause, because I'll see patients come in and tell me, on the milder side, I can't concentrate. It's like there's access to memory, there's cotton wool somewhere in between. So brain fog is a real issue. And then there's what you've described, feeling teary, feeling like you're just agitated around people. Someone does the smallest thing and you just snap immediately. And then this is the milder side, and then we can range towards full-on anxiety and depressive symptoms. And it's important to highlight that these are symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, so that you don't sit and think, okay, now I'm going crazy. And it's not even, in fact, a lot of times I'll have conversations, not even in a clinic setting, in a social setting, and as she's describing the things that she's been going through, I'm like, you need to come in for a consult, right? And that's the first time that she's realizing, so these are not normal. So my mood swings are not normal, So it's important that we mention that mental health symptoms can be a really big primary thing to look out for. In terms of support for our women during this phase. Because again, we're describing symptoms where me, the sufferer, might not realize there are changes. So if I'm at home and I notice, Mom, she's not herself, what role do I have to play? Or my partner, if I'm the husband in this scenario, what role do I have?
I think even just recognizing, I'll probably use like my mom as an example. When I started, she would say, I really, it's so hot. And I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not. In fact, we are freezing. In fact, here, 3 jumpers later.
So one of the most important things is to first, I think as a society, speak about it so that everyone, it's not a foreign concept. It's not a taboo to say, I'm in the menopause, for example. I don't know how many women, even in corporate, would be able to stand up in a meeting at a board and say, I am going to be wiping myself with a towel through this meeting because I'm having a hot flash.
And then remember, we also have the added social dynamic where we sort of discard women as they get older. Once you hit a certain age, whatever the society thinks of as that age, but once you're of a certain age, you're no longer relevant, you're no longer important or useful. And so even then paying attention enough to be supportive of changes that are happening.
Exactly. And I think also because our moms, for example, they've been there, they're, they've done so much work, they've raised us. It's almost like we don't see them like they can suffer or struggle,
exactly.
like they're superhumans.
Yeah.
So for them to be able to come and say, I'm having some joint pains, or I'm struggling with I'm crying and I have no idea. So I think to make space for women to be able to talk about this, and even for younger girls, our husbands, our partners, sort of our male brothers, the male side. So first being able to talk about it and allow for that space, and then recommend that they see a doctor and just go like, yeah, mom, I've noticed that you're quite snappy.
Yeah.
It may be that you're going through something, that's fine, but perhaps you should see a doctor, and not in the stigma sort of type of way.
Yeah. Don't condemn and say it like an insult.
Exactly.
It's literally, I'm trying to suggest we go figure out what could be happening.
Let's go and find out what it is, because you're quite snappy these days,
know.
Or you're sleeping too much. Your mom who would wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning is now choosing to wake up at 10 o'clock. It may be fine if she's chosen to wake up, but if she's telling you, I'm really tired, I'm struggling to wake up, I think we should all be each other's keepers and say, maybe we should see a doctor.
Yeah.
In terms of doctors, we are going to be sort of talking about it even more, raising more awareness, so that even doctors then are able to pick up on that. When a woman comes and says, this is what I'm struggling with, then you don't fob them off and go like,
you're not too dismissive. You actually can
you
take
actually
the next
listen
step
and refer appropriately.
In the context of the fact that we're seeing menopause earlier, I've just thought about it and I'm like, okay, so then will we revisit the definition of premature ovarian failure? So that's I'm just sitting here going, hang on one second. Okay, so what is premature ovarian failure?
Okay, so traditionally we've described premature ovarian failure as anyone who's having these symptoms and diagnosed less than the age of 40. And then there's early sort of menopause, which is even for 30. So you can be 30 years old and go into the menopause, which is very distressing.
Yeah.
Because at 30 is sort of when most people are saying, I want a child.
Nice, when I'm thinking about a family.
Baby.
Yeah.
The figures are less than about 1% of women will be menopausal by the age of 40, and then 0.1% by the age of 30.
Right.
Now, it sounds like very small numbers, but those are significant numbers because it means that you're going to be in menopause for a longer period of time. Health has become so good that we're living long.
Yeah.
My grandmother, we just buried her at 97 last year.
Yeah.
So if you imagine that people who used to get into the menopause at the age of 50, which is what the definition was, if you're living up to 90, you have 40 years of menopause. Now, if you start at 30, then you're going to be here for a long time.
For a longer time, struggling with. Yeah.
And this is the data that we've got. The biggest study is from the States. It's called the SWAN study. And they've actually noticed that African ladies, Black African women are experiencing more severe symptoms, but also for a longer period of time. So we may revisit. It's not yet being changed because even just as a subject, very few people have been talking about the menopause. This is probably less 3 or 4 years now we're talking about this.
To talk about seeing subject. An earlier age.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, from your practice and your experience, I am now 35. I've come in Dietary, Dr. Muchiri. You see, I've been a woman up and coming. My career was my primary focus. I have really given it my all. I now have a partner. I feel we're settled enough. I'm thinking about having babies. But then you do some lab work. Maybe let's start first with what labs you would come in, because I've been trying. And again, as you know, we describe failure to conceive, or at least consider that you failed within a year. But again, it's also age related. So I've been trying for a year and nothing seems to be happening. And us guys are trying, not oops, I've actually been tracking my cycle and I know what we're doing and it's actually working. As in, it's not working in terms of we're not conceiving. So what are the first steps? I come in and I see you, and my concern is I'm not being able to have a baby. What tests would we do? Because now we're linking it towards menopause. What tests would we do that you would then go, okay, ovarian reserve is the challenge here.
So what we do is we do 2 things. We've got 3 tests. But because you've asked the question from a fertility angle, the most important things that we do, the ovarian reserve, which is in blood, it's called the anti-Mullerian hormone, usually produced from within the ovary. It's a hormone that comes and it goes into your blood, and we're able to measure that.
Yeah.
And a scan, usually we'll do a transvaginal scan. We can do it from the tummy on the top, which is transabdominal, but transvaginally is quite easy because the ovaries are quite close to the probe.
Yeah.
And we want to count the number of the small follicles where we expect that their eggs sat in. And there's certain expectations. So if you're about 35, there's a certain level of hormone that I would be expecting, below which then I'll say that's either a low ovarian reserve or none. So if we use different units in different countries, but it can be, we know the range.
Yeah.
We have ranges.
Yeah.
So we'd be able to say, I think this is low, it's reduced, but it's not zero. But it can also be zero. Okay.
Yeah.
When I do the scan and I'm looking at the ovaries, I'm counting the follicles. I would normally expect for a 35-year-old about 10 to 20 follicles. So if I'm counting in total both left and right ovaries, and I find there's 3 or 4, then I start to think this is not looking great.
Yeah.
Now, if you have symptoms, the things that we've discussed, then we can do what is called follicular stimulating hormone. The FSH is produced from the brain. And I usually describe it to my patients as something that is talking to the ovaries. The body is so clever. I get fascinated. This is why I do this job.
I'm in medicine as well, because we are it's a miraculous system.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So the brain, what normally happens is that it sends out FSH, the follicular stimulating hormone, to stimulate the follicles by the name.
Yeah.
So when you don't have enough follicles in the ovary, your brain is sort of confused. No, it's not confused. It's very clever because it goes like, I need to make more FSH to try and get you to get more follicles. I'm not seeing the response, what I need.
As a response,
So the FSH rises. Now, it's not one set figure. It can go up and down, but usually some countries will say up to 25. The WHO will use 40 international units as a cutoff.
Yeah.
So if today I did an FSH, I don't say that is menopause or perimenopause. I wait and I diagnose that 6 weeks later. So you repeat the test.
Yeah.
But because your question then was fertility, you've come to try and get a baby, we've got to figure out, are we going to be able to make you produce eggs? Is there a store for that? We can give some medicine, which usually works on the level of the brain as well, a high amount of hormone to try and push the ovaries.
Yeah.
But sometimes if it's so low, it means there's no eggs to stimulate. So we can't even do treatment, and we end up using donor eggs, for example, to get you pregnant.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, back to young women, because I'm sure right now they're adding volume. They're like, wait, what are you saying?
Yes.
What are you saying? Are some of these symptoms I'm experiencing? Should I be concerned? Should I be seeing my doctor? Lifestyle.
Yes.
Lifestyle is a big issue. I know. We are now in the phase where we are working in the same industry as our male partners. We are, climbing the corporate ladder. We are making our own coin. And so we are matching them lifestyle-wise. Yeah. So we are drinking more. We are smoking all manner of things.
Everything.
Me, I learn something new every day. Yeah. Like my lungs do not understand the language you're speaking. But lifestyle, what's the effect? And the possibility that lifestyle is actually what is influencing this much more than, genetics or anything else. What about lifestyle do we need to be on the lookout for?
Okay. The best example of where there are not much problems and where the menopausal women don't struggle as much is Japan, which is very interesting. So if you look at how the Japanese lifestyle is set and how they live, then you will see the stark difference.
Right. You
don't find Japanese women smoking or taking alcohol. They really take care of themselves. Their diet is what we call Mediterranean diet. There's lots of fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
You come to Nairobi and tell people to eat vegetables, they look at you like,
it's a war.
Is that food of poverty? Us guys
once I've made it, once I've reached a certain, certain
level.
I was struggling to get to this place. Now I can have a
now
steak
I'm here,
every
and you're
other
telling me
day.
to eat dengu. Why? Why should I eat dengu and beans and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So if we were to comparatively look, we would have like our grandmothers. That's a one way of comparing.
Yeah.
But also if you're looking at areas of the world where there's a stark difference, you would take Japanese against any other country.
Right.
So lots of fruit and vegetables. The theory is it's antioxidant. So you're being able to mop up a lot of, sort of bad stuff from your system.
Yeah.
Alcohol, smoking, high-fat diet. It's interesting that now there was a paper maybe, I want to say 6-7 years ago that said even if you're young, 25-year-old, and you live off KFC, McDonald's, you will struggle to conceive. So you could be skinny, but your inside
usually that's the scenario. Inside
and you will eat your KFC with a Coke, and I'm not against any of these things. I really like a KFC, but it's the consistent stuff that we've been putting in our bodies.
True.
And we are looking at data, looking at the science, and trying to tease out which ones of this is a problem. Things like alcohol is very difficult to quantify what is enough alcohol. We haven't yet found someone who says if you take a glass of wine every day, it's okay.
You're fine. Yeah.
We haven't found.
If you take more than that,
it's not fine. So we don't have that marker, and therefore we cannot, sort of say stop completely or take as much as you can. We don't have that science. At some point, hopefully, we will. But that's quite an impactful thing. Now, BMI then translates. BMI is your body mass index. Translates directly to what you're eating and what kinds of exercise you're doing. And BMI in itself, a high BMI in itself is a risk factor for other things, not just fertility. We see a lot of breast cancer, which is directly related to your weight. So the theory is around a lot of oxidation and oxidative stress on your body that then will be harmful to your internal organs. So we do need to be very cautious about
exercise.
Exercise.
Exercise. Because I have patients who will tell me, I climb the stairs. Hi, doctor, do you want me to hike? Oh my God, gym. What are those things? What are those? Also, I'm not big.
Why are you suffering?
Why are you making me suffer? I'm not big. Or if I join a gym, it's for status. It's not even for workouts. But how significant is the difference between someone who's working out and who's not?
It's massive. Even just from a menopause perspective. Remember we said that the hormones will affect even your bones and your muscle. So if you have weak bones, then you're going to fracture easily. You've got to strengthen your bones. And then remember we said when your estrogen is starting to drop, it will affect your heart, high blood pressure, and cholesterol. So you've got to do both forms of exercise. You've got to work out, i.e. cardio, you're burning off calories, and you've got to weight train. However you want to do that. If you're hiking, you're carrying a bag and you're sort of straining and stressing your body a bit. We don't need to do much, which is why I get fascinated when people say they don't exercise. I do lots of exercise. The requirement is just 30 minutes a day.
Exactly.
You can do 30 minutes every single day, Monday to Sunday. Make it a thing that you just do. In the same way that you will want to eat KFC every Friday, you can just exercise for 30 minutes. If you're a bit more intense, train an hour a day, but the recommendation is actually just 30 minutes
a day. And we've also been recommending more and more focusing in as much as you're doing your cardio as well, but building muscle mass. There's such a huge difference between women who have maintained their muscle mass, and this is because of the changes we see with menopause, where we lose muscle mass, we lose bone strength, and so you become so susceptible to fractures and injuries. So that's another thing, like literally continue to build your muscle mass throughout.
And it's easier to do it when you're younger and build a practice than, and I mean, we say it's never too late. I follow a few ladies on social media platforms who started in their 70s. They're way stronger than someone who's never exercised.
In fact, sometimes I'm like, am I doing anything? I watch them in the gym, I'm like, maybe we need to check what we are doing.
But you'll find a lot of them had already started a practice of exercising. My mom has been working for the last, I think, 5 years. She walks 12 kilometers every single day, come rain, sunshine, or hell or high water. So make it a practice so that by the time you're getting to 60 or 70, then you have, sort of good body to keep you for, up to this 90 that we're saying we're probably going to stay.
Let's enter now the place where it's a bit controversial.
Is there anything ever controversial in menopause?
In menopause, you would be surprised, because even me, I was surprised. Hormone replacement therapy. The big elephant in the room. And I find this to be challenging, especially here. I'm not entirely sure what the practice is outside, but here, it tends to be that doctors don't know any better. We are stuck in that phase where we said HRT causes cancer. Therefore, we are not going to offer anybody hormone replacement. And we've stuck there. So then I'll come across lots of women who will say, but my doctor said it's bad, but yes, I'm suffering. I have the worst symptoms, but what choice do I have? So talk to me about hormone replacement therapy.
It's a
Talk to
it's
all
so
of us.
beautiful. I like hormones, and we are here because we still have the hormones.
Right?
So if they start to drop, then I would hope that we can give a few to sustain us.
Yeah.
We just come from the Kenya Obstetrics and Gynaecology Society conference, and I actually presented at that conference, and we had a plenary session for the same. It's the history behind HRT that's brought the problem, and this is worldwide, so it's not a Kenya problem. There was a big study that ran a while back, and women were started on HRT. It was quite erratic. It was that you have symptoms, we put you on HRT without proper sort of risk assessment. And studies like those are important for us because then we learn from them. And it is there where then we started to notice, we do have quite a bit of cancers, and that's coming up. But the correlation for HRT as a cause of cancer, which is what scientists and researchers probably we need to do better in interpreting that science. So some people came and said, yes, it causes cancer.
Yeah, like that was the end. That was the conclusion.
Yes.
HRT equals cancer. Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuances. We need to understand what type of women were being given the medicine, at what point they're being given the medication. Remember, we are now living longer.
Yeah.
So it may have well been that we would still have gotten many people having cancer, whether or not they were on HRT. What we now know, and why we are talking a bit about hormone replacement, is that it was first the time when you were starting, and we now have what is called the window of opportunity. And this is why it's important for women to identify their symptoms a bit earlier, because you want to start HRT within 10 years of having started the symptoms, not at 70 years old. Okay, and then we also do a risk assessment. Now, if your mom, your aunt, your female relatives, even sometimes the male relatives have had either breast cancer, ovarian cancer, or colon cancer, you may already have a predisposed genetically to have cancer. Doesn't matter whether you have HRT or not. So there's a risk assessment that we should have. Some people have they're predisposed to having clots, for example. You shouldn't be on HRT if you're predisposed, or at least the forms of HRT should be different. Now, since that time, the science was so damning that it made also producers of medications, manufacturers, not produce HRT, which is so sad, because there's a whole gap of nearly 10 to 20 years when we had only pills and nothing. And then now we've started to say, okay, so if I don't give you tablets, I can give you a patch. I can give you a cream because your problems are only down here. You don't have hot flashes. You don't have. So there's different medications that are coming up. I'm very excited about that. But also the research should also include African women, Kenyans, because like I said, comparatively, they're having more hot flashes. They will focus on producing for a market for whatever they're finding. So even for me, it's a call for doctors and scientists and researchers to also do research that is based on the continent, so that we are able to say, no, actually our problems are bone problems. So we may never need...
problems are mental health problems.
Or the mental health problems.
Maybe.
So we don't need overall HRT and hormones. What we need is mental health medications to sort out this.
So I think maybe ours is just to encourage colleagues to stop being so afraid, because I think that conversation tends to be shut down immediately. The number of women I look after who tell me, even convincing them, now the damage is already done. Because you're coming in with vaginal dryness and I want to give you a cream, an estrogen-based cream. And she's like, it has a hormone. Ni hormono.
Ni hormono. Sikulangi hormones.
And you don't have any other, like you said, we've assessed for risks and you're perfect candidate. Because again, that you've actually preempted my next question for who's a candidate and who's not. But again, we assess for risk. And if you are lower on the risk scale and you actually would benefit, and then severity of symptoms as well. These are things we need to sit down and reevaluate and actually educate ourselves around what is available and what research has been done since. Because like you said, when such a big, conclusive, destructive study or interpretation of the study comes out, everybody's like...
we're not...
Because, I actually had to sit back and think about our training on menopause. I actually sat down and thought about it. Do I actually... beyond being told what menopause is, did we discuss HRT at all?
I think it was one lecture. I actually had to look back
like
at
in
the
summary,
curriculum.
Summarized little.
I know the professor who gave us that lecture, that one lecture.
Yeah. So
by the time we were coming to do our exams, then the study, the findings were already so in vogue.
Exactly.
So if we were, I don't even think we could examine students on the subject because we were already telling
it's
them
taboo. You're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to even offer HRT. And no one says then what else do you do?
Exactly.
If I don't have HRT, or if I don't have the options, or if I can't give HRT, what am I supposed to tell these women? So even the doctors are at a loss.
Yeah. So again, I don't blame doctors, but then we know in the field, in what we do as doctors, in general, it's not even specialists. We constantly read. You have to keep informing yourself, keep looking out for studies like what you are doing, look out for the newest data, and then incorporate it into your practice. And then hopefully we start to see an improvement of patient care, how we look after the women in our communities. Right, okay. Outside of HRT.
Yes.
What else? Like you've just
many
said.
other things.
What else can we do to help
things.
with some of the symptoms, as well as just, because like you said, we're living longer. Do we have to be so uncomfortable throughout the last phase of our lives? And sometimes it's not even the last, because if I went into menopause and, at 45, and then I'm living till 105, I mean,
many years.
That's a whole life.
That's another whole life.
Another life. So should I live in complete suffering throughout this time?
No. So first, the hopeful bit is your body actually adjusts now to the new level of hormones. So it's a part where your body is trying to figure out, like, wow, what is this? And it's a bit all over the place. But your body adjusts to new level of hormones, and then it becomes better. So it's that bit that is in the middle. So there are different ways to go about it. We have hormonal is HRT, which is the estrogen, which you ideally you'd be producing from your ovary, and the progesterone that balances that out. So those are the hormone therapies. We can even use the pill, contraceptive pill, as part of HRT. Hormone replacement therapy is not contraceptive. So you can actually get pregnant while on HRT.
Exactly.
So that's important to know. People get surprised.
Say that louder for those in the back.
They're like,
because
but me, I'm already in
the number of retirement babies I've had to explain to people.
Yes. Some 48-year-olds, 49, they get a bit surprised. And you've told them that their period is not going to be coming. True. And they think now.
And some of these early pregnancy symptoms are some of the same things they're experiencing with perimenopause. So by the time we're actually diagnosing pregnancy, someone is actually
a bit
moving.
Late. There's an actual baby there.
There's a baby moving around and it's caught her off. She's like, what is that sensation?
So HRT is not contraception. Please. It will let us remain knowing, be informed. Because even you surprise us in the clinic when you come with this pregnancy that we were not ready for, even ourselves. But now I've lost my train of thought.
So the HRT is not contraception, but we will put you on both. Okay, again, depending on what you're eligible for, then we estrogen can as well as progesterone.
So that's hormonal therapy. Non-hormonal therapy is anything else that is not estrogen and progesterone. For example, some of the mental health medications actually work well for hot flashes, because the hot flashes are also, we call them vasomotor, so they are related to the nerves.
The nervous system,
so you don't necessarily have to be on hormone replacement to sort out hot flashes. If you are, then the hot flashes can be sorted out if you're on HRT. And other symptoms. But if your main problem is this anxiety, panic attacks, then medication that we would normally give for people to sort of calm their nerves can also sort out the vasomotor symptoms.
Right.
Medication like for the bones, that's not hormonal. So if your problem is the bone pains, muscular pains, there's medicines for that specifically, and they strengthen your bones. So that's not hormonal medication.
Right.
And then there is something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You come and talk to other women, and then you realize, so I'm not by myself. Okay, so if what do you do in your house? I open the windows. Okay, I could open the windows.
And
so
you?
What do you do?
I have
a fan. I have a new fan I've seen from the internet. You put it on your phone and you walk around with it. And
you walk around like this.
It's fantastic because that's all I've been struggling with. So Cognitive behavioral therapy and, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, just talking about it actually helps. When people know, okay, so this is a transition, it's probably not going to last forever.
True.
Other people have gone before and they've survived.
I'm not abnormal.
I'm not abnormal. I'm not running mad.
Yeah.
That usually helps. But if it doesn't, then we also have psychiatric related medications. Now, not to say that you're mad, but it can make you feel mad.
Speak louder for the ones at the back.
Yeah. Yes. This psychiatry thing that is made to be like they're mad people.
We're so afraid of mental health conversations. And yet again, it's one of the reasons why, especially for this podcast, I talk about sexual, reproductive, and related mental health. Yes. There's no way to separate the two from each other. Yeah. You're not going to have such sensitive conversations or areas about things that happen with your body that is not going to be related with what you think
mind and what you feel and how you express all those things. Yeah. So and then there's food. Again, so going back to that diet thing, they're natural foods that got small amounts of estrogen. They're called phytoestrogens. I encourage you to Google. I told my mom, just Google. It's a whole list of like 30 things, and you'll be surprised. The things that you don't like eating have phytoestrogens. Now, usually I put this a caveat. If I tell you have a bit of soya, you don't go and take all the soya beans in the market. And then you just eat soya bean for breakfast, lunch, soya milk, soya saucy.
Daktari told me cow milk is bad, so now it's soya.
Now it's only soya. Yeah. No, we don't do like that. It's just small amounts. And the reason we are cautious about that is, remember, your body wasn't designed to have estrogen forever. So a lot of estrogen can predispose you to cancer of the uterus. Exactly. So you've got to do this, but in moderation. There's many different kinds of beans, especially beans and nuts. They're very good with what we call phytoestrogens. So again, non-hormonal. Now, some people may benefit even just from yoga as an exercise. It's, it will strengthen your bones. You'll be in a nice zone for your mental health. So you don't necessarily need to have medicines. There are other non-hormonal therapies.
We also have things like supplements. Your doctor may recommend certain supplements. Again, I don't go into too much detail because there are many self-diagnosticians and over-the-counter treatment experts. So see your doctor.
I'd suggest talk to the doctor. And again, remember, these things are also vitamin D deficiency, for example, will give you the symptoms of menopause. Exactly. You feel tired, you feel like you're very sad all the time, your brain is hazy, you're not concentrating. It could be the vitamin D. For our setting, it's low iron, low, sort of low HB, low hemoglobin. You bleed because you have lots of fibroids, and then you're having heavy bleeds that are going to make you also feel tired. So I'd suggest, let's see doctors. Let's just make it a habit of seeing a doctor, please. And a real doctor, not your friend in the corridor.
Today you came to fight.
Always.
Because we say these things out loud and you're like,
I just like to say them.
Daktari, I went to so and so and they gave me this mixture, this herbal preparation mixture that cures fibroids, it cures endometriosis, it cancels cancer. And I'm like, really?
I'm like, wow, what science do they have for that?
Then I retire. Wow. Where are we still working?
We just go and produce herbal things. I think this is where we are not doing very well.
Yeah, maybe we.
I have nothing against herbal stuff. I mean, like I said, they are natural
There are natural things we can use, but let's also be realistic, guys.
And a lot of them are not regulated.
True.
So use something that is regulated. Someone has actually done some science and said, I'm going to take that soya and make it into a powder, and you will be taking it as in water as one tablet. That's fine.
As opposed to some mixture of something that I'm telling you to trust and believe
that you don't know where it's coming from.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I think especially for women's health, it's not that we are very gullible. I think women can be sold to a lot of things. And then it becomes a marketing gimmick, or it's marketing because they'll be like, these women will take anything. When you're desperate, you can take literally anything. It's out of desperation.
I also think it's out of the culture that we don't talk about the things we're going through. And so instead of talking, because I feel shame. And it's the one thing, if nothing else on this podcast, I try to debunk is shame. Because if I have so much shame that I will not talk to a friend, I'll not talk to a physician, a specialist, something, I will find something on social media and immediately plug in and believe, because then I don't have to actually talk to another person. Let me just try this thing. And it's usually not until, as you've seen, sometimes we see fibroids, goodness, you're like,
Like, this problem would have been an easy one to solve, but now here we are.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think more removing shame, and just, even if you're not comfortable yet to go to a specialist or a stranger, start the conversation amongst yourselves. I like that I see lots of women's chamas having conversations. Church women's groups have been invited a few times to talk to women in churches. Just learning a little bit about your body, and that if this symptom arises, then you should come in. If you notice these changes, this is fine, it's normal, but again, up to a certain point, come in and get some help. Okay, so as our final parting shot, how best do you think we can support our women as we go through this transition, the big menopause, the big scary end of my fertility, end of my youth? Like, we see a lot of women going through a lot of distress because of this transition. What can we do? In fact, now I'm talking about everyone, not just the physicians, just in the community. How can we better support our women through this transition so that it stops feeling like such a catastrophic event?
So I think what you're doing already as a podcast is quite useful. Information, I think, is important. If you take yourself back, and I think even for your audience, I don't know how the new curriculum is working, but in our time we were talked to so much about periods that they're coming. We knew they were coming. You
knew
were
this big
ready.
thing
This big
was
thing is going to happen. In fact, they used to miss out on all the other body things that will happen and just talk about the periods. I think they need to also add, your body will change. But that discussion helps a lady to prepare herself, and you're surrounded, the women are surrounded by their moms and their aunties, and even more the men. So maybe my dad not so much involved, but my dad would also not have been surprised, because it's sort of so out there that it's expected that this is coming. But if you look on the other side, we talk about women expecting that they will get babies at some point. That's a whole different conversation. But no one talks about menopause coming. It catches all of us.
In fact, every single woman who goes through menopause is surprised by it, and
it's
has
like,
little to no information about it.
And so you can't prepare for what you don't know. So that's, I think, one of the most important things is we talk about it. Let's talk about it. It's going to come. It is coming. Unless you are not here after the age of 25, please be assured you will become menopausal if you're a lady. So talking about it, involving the men as well. I find, and I've had conversations with sort of older men in their 60s, 70s. They look at me also in equal surprise. They're like, you mean my wife? This is the thing.
You mean this is what has been happening?
This is what has been happening. He had no idea, never heard of menopause before, didn't know anything.
And doesn't even know how to support.
And how to support. He wouldn't know that, yes, she if she says, this is what I'm feeling, then I don't push. I don't do odd things that, okay, now you're pissed, I'm going to go away from the house for like 3 days. That's not supportive. It's to say, I'm here. Tell me what you need, and I can be able to help. It's that other outside person saying, I know a doctor. I know this Dr. Kinothia, she talked about it on a podcast. Listen to this podcast.
Just listen to this episode.
So I think that's one of the biggest things at the moment, is to be aware about it. Doctors, please educate yourselves on menopause, please.
You can't say that more enough. Gosh, guys, read.
And all doctors.
Read, yes.
All of them.
All doctors.
If you see women at any point of your life, even if you're an orthopedic surgeon, it doesn't matter. You're a dermatologist. Menopause will affect the skin as well. So you're a dermatologist, yes, you're going to see her for the skin. She'll tell you it's very dry. I've got all these patches. I don't know what's happening to my skin. Just dive a bit into, when was the last time you had your periods? It's a very simple thing to ask. When is the last time? How have your periods been? We're all outside of gynecology and obstetrics. My God, everyone has fears.
Afraid.
I don't know why.
Of the question about your period. And also, there's a lot of backlash towards doctors who ask about the period. It's interesting. You'd go online on social media and women are up in arms. Doctors are only interested in my period. You're only interested in me having babies. You're only interested in my fertility. And I'm like, no, we ask about your period because of many, many, many issues. It's linked to your overall health. And so, yes, I agree. Doctors, please just investigate. Like a small reproductive health history. A small one.
So we don't want you to go into detail.
We
just want you to send that lady and say, she says her last period was 3 months ago. She's come to see me because of joint pains. But she had her period 3 months ago. probably not arthritis as you would imagine.
Exactly.
It could be just her
exactly.
menopausal
I'm
things.
treating her for a fracture.
Yes.
Call in your
Just
colleague. Let's
call,
just
ask. It's such a simple question.
True.
Please, let's not fear.
Yeah,
It's
true.
a uterus. It's beautiful. We love it. We want to know what it's doing.
We are very keen on fertility in this country,
Yes.
culturally. So let's expound on supporting the person,
Yes,
not just the
there
organ.
over here. There are many other things.
True.
Yes.
I think we'll close on that note.
All right.
Because I think you've given us a lot to think about, especially, like you were saying, to colleagues as well as women who are going through these changes themselves. I mean, one day it'll be us as well. Sometimes I suspect. Let's not just leave
in my
it.
head,
It's a heat
not
wave.
soon.
It's a
but
heat wave. It's a heat
in
wave
my
in the
head, it's
city.
not soon. I do hike and my joints have been acting up.
Same.
Not talking much about it.
Yeah, you just leave it alone. It's okay. It's okay. But no, hopefully this conversation, to the audience who are listening in or watching, I hope that this conversation starts bigger ones amongst yourselves. I hope it helps you stop being so afraid to go in and ask for help. If you're experiencing any of these symptoms, it's time to just investigate a bit more. Start tracking. Start looking at what's going on with your body, and then also lifestyle. Look at your lifestyle. Is it supportive? I know we all enjoy a glass of wine here and there, and women are very shy when you ask them for history around alcohol. No?
Oh yeah, they all take a little.
Yeah, just
How much do you take?
Daktari, I just
Socially,
sip.
socially,
I just sip.
with a meal. With a meal on Friday,
occasionally.
actually.
Yeah,
on Friday.
it's not even all the time.
no.
And yet, I've seen the bottles, guys.
Yes,
So anyway, I'll leave it on that note. As always, I'll encourage you to leave comments. If you're shy, send a DM, send an email. Please encourage Dr. Muchiri to come back on to add more information. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a lovely one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.